Are you accidentally triggering a man's red flags and you don't even know it? Are you accidentally pushing him away when you actually want to be pulling him in closer and making him feel like he wants to get closer to you? Hello, my name is Matthew Coast, and today we're going to be discussing 7 different things that women commonly do that make men lose interest pretty much immediately. So what are these 7 things? Let's start with number 1 is chasing him. So if you're chasing a man, he is going in the wrong direction. Most women do this because they're scared. They're afraid that if they don't chase a man, that he'll forget about her and he'll end up disappearing. But this actually devalues you in a man's eyes and makes him lose interest, makes him stop feeling as much attraction for you, and it makes him start feeling like he wants to pull away and disappear altogether. Men want a prize, a woman that he feels is just a little bit above him in terms of value. And so what do men value? Men value women that they work for and earn. And so if you're doing everything for the man, if you're, a man pulls away, or if he's, not doing what you want, all of a sudden you run in and start trying to do everything and plan everything and contact him and make sure everything's going all right. Men tend to lean back and they don't value you as much. They start taking you for granted. You want him to chase at the beginning to prove his interest, and then you want to build the relationship together from there. So you want him to chase you at the very beginning to show you that he's really interested in you and that he's the right guy for you. And then you want to build the relationship together. Anything where you're not building the relationship together, one person will probably start feeling like they're being taken for granted and they will get really, really disappointed with it. All right, so number 2 is making him the goal. And so I talk about this a lot. In the men's dating industry, they actually have a term for this, and it's called one-itis. And basically what it means is that there's one person and you're stuck on that person. And that person isn't right for you. Maybe they aren't really that interested in you, or maybe there's just a bunch of red flags that they have, or maybe they're just not the right person. Your values don't line up, or whatever it is. But you want to make it work with that person, right? And it's on both sides, right? And if you're doing that, what ends up happening is that it makes him feel like he already has you. And so he doesn't feel like he needs to do anything. And what ends up happening, so there's been studies done on this, and it's actually scientifically proven that men feel more attracted to women when the man is uncertain about how the woman feels about him. So a man feels more attracted to you when he's not sure, not completely certain about how you feel about him. And so you don't want to give all your power away and make it all about him and, do all that kind of stuff, because he will start feeling less and less and less attracted to you. And so you don't want that. Plus, it also puts pressure on him and on you to do all the right things. And you don't want that, because that pressure just kind of tears things apart. It creates stress. It makes you feel stressed out being around each other. And then eventually you start losing interest for each other, or he starts losing interest for you. And either one of those things is a bad thing. So stop making it about fixing him and molding him into the right guy, the guy that you want him to be. That doesn't work for anyone. It doesn't work for him, and it doesn't work for you. Stop making it about fixing and molding him, and instead make it about acceptance, right? Wouldn't you rather have a guy who accepts and loves you, and isn't trying to convince you that you're right for each other or whatever, right? Wouldn't you rather have a guy who loves you and accepts you for who you are rather than trying to mold you into the right person? My guess is that you would. So, all right, number 3, proving that you're the right woman for him. So this goes to that whole thing where I talk about the law of belief transference, where You're trying to be the perfect woman. You're trying to convince him that you're right for each other. You're sleeping with him to try to get his emotions involved in it. And the reason that you do that, like I talked about with the law of belief transference, is that the only reason somebody does this is because they don't really believe that they're good enough or that they're right or any of those things. So they feel like they have to prove it. They have to convince them. They have to, try to win this person over. And you don't want to do that, because what you'll end up doing is actually convincing him of the opposite. Because men might not consciously understand this, or they might not consciously feel it or know it, but they'll just feel it subconsciously, where they'll just start losing interest and losing attraction over time, because things will just start popping up in their mind. Like, maybe, she isn't really the person that I thought she was. Maybe she's not the high value woman that I thought she was. Because if she was, why would she be trying to convince me of these things, right? And so instead, what you want to do is you want to lean back and allow him to come to you and let the real you shine without trying to prove anything to him at all. And so it's far better to be in a relationship where he loves you for who you are and not for what you can do with him. Wouldn't you agree? All right, so number four is making him your life. And so the way that I usually hear this is a very, very common pattern that I hear from a lot of women. And what they usually say, it's almost always the exact same thing. And what they say is that they give everything. They're like, I give everything to this man, or I give everything for this man, and he always just takes me for granted, right? He doesn't appreciate it. I feel like he's slipping away more and more and more. This is a pattern, and it doesn't ever work. So if you're in a situation where you feel like you're giving everything to a man and you're doing everything for a man, and it's not getting any better, and maybe it's even making things worse over time, you want to stop doing that immediately. Right? It's a noble thing, right? A lot of women come to me and they're like, well, I gave everything, right? I gave everything to him and he took me for granted. That scoundrel, right? And it's a very noble thing, right? Like, you gave yourself totally. You gave everything, or at least you feel like you gave everything. But it's not healthy. It's not a healthy thing to do, and it's not attractive. And no matter what a guy tells you beforehand, because sometimes guys will tell women or encourage this kind of behavior, and then they lose interest in them over time. Don't fall for that nonsense. It's not attractive. You don't want to do that. Usually there's only a few things that a man needs. And so you shouldn't be doing all the work and doing everything and trying to make everything happen. It's not good. Have your own life and make him earn his place in your life. That's a much, much better position for you to be coming from. And it's far, far more attractive. All right, so number 5 is hidden expectations that you just expect him to just know about. And so usually what this looks like is you get really upset with a guy and he has no idea why. And you think in your mind, he should know why I'm getting so upset with him and what he's done wrong, and he should want to fix it. But it doesn't work, right? And it only makes you upset and frustrated and annoyed, and it makes him upset and frustrated and annoyed, and it pulls you guys apart, and it creates negative friction between the two of you in the relationship that doesn't need to be there. And instead, here's what you should do. Replace your expectations for standards. So have standards, not expectations. So what's the difference between the two of these things? Expectations are when you think he should act or behave a certain way. And if he doesn't act or behave that way, you get upset or frustrated by it. And standards is when you have a baseline level of behavior that someone needs to meet in order to spend time with you. You don't get upset. You don't get frustrated with them. You don't get jealous or angry or try to get revenge. You don't attack them for it or shame them or do any of that kind of stuff. You communicate what your standards are. You tell him, you talk to him about what your standards are. You find out what's going on with him. And then you let him know that, this is what you need in your relationship. And having standards is so much better for your dating life because he will actually try to strive. Most men, if he really is interested in you and he's attracted to you, he'll try to strive to meet those standards. With expectations, you just create conflict and fights. And so you don't want to do that. Instead, you want to have standards. And sometimes guys just aren't right for you. And it's one of those things. It doesn't matter how much you like him. It doesn't matter how sweet he's been to you. It doesn't matter, how much time you spent or how much you've invested in a guy. Some men just aren't right for you. And the faster that you can accept that reality, the reality of the situation, if in fact he isn't right for you, the better off you're both going to be. And the less you're going to be frustrated, the less you're going to have fights. And the more you can just walk away and say, hey, if he ever, decides that he wants to get his self together and start meeting my standards, that's great. And if he doesn't, that's fine too, because I'm going to meet, there's millions, hundreds of millions, billions of men out there. And I'm going to meet one who will meet my standards and who will want to create the kind of relationship that I want to have together with me. Okay, number 6 is sabotaging things because of past wounds. And usually you don't know that you're doing this. And a lot of times what will have to happen is that somebody will need to tell you about it, or you'll need to see a pattern that happens over and over and over again in your dating life or in your relationships, where you're doing something, you start sabotaging things. And a lot of times what happens, one of the reasons why this is so difficult is because a lot of times you think the problem's the other person and the problem is actually you. And so it's one of those things where you have to create a lot of awareness around this, or you'll have to talk to people who will tell you that maybe it's actually something that's going on with you. And then you have to do some introspection and look at what it is that you're doing and say, is it me doing these things? What are my beliefs around this? Am I potentially sabotaging a great situation, or is this actually a bad situation? And that's actually one of the great things about getting a coach, because coaches can tell you about things that you don't know are actually there. So this usually looks like misinterpreting behavior as wicked behavior and then getting revenge or attacking or shaming or blaming him in order to protect yourself. You're trying to protect yourself, and so you misinterpret what he's doing and you're like, that's wicked or malicious or bad behavior. And if you're still hurting from the past, you need to heal. You need to heal yourself before getting into another relationship. Because if you don't, what's going to end up happening is that you'll end up sabotaging good relationships that you get into, or you'll end up attracting more bad ones. That's what happens when you don't heal your past, is that you continue to attract bad, or you sabotage anything that's good that ends up showing up. And so you have to heal. If you do heal, you actually have a chance at something long-term and real. So make sure that you are doing whatever you can to heal your past. If you want, you can join events that I have. I do live virtual events where I take you through processes sometimes that help you heal what's going on in your past so that you can become stronger and come from a place where you're feeling whole and powerful and coming from happiness and feeling great and joy in your life. So number 7 is neediness. And so this usually looks like baiting a man for compliments, constantly needing reassurance that everything's okay or that he still likes or loves you, right? Like you're like, oh, is everything great? Are you okay? Do you still love me? Right? That's usually what it sounds like. Or when I was talking about constantly baiting for compliments, it's usually like, do I look good right now? Are you sure I look good? Right? Any of that kind of stuff. You're doing that because of coming from neediness, right? You're coming from a place of neediness where you're unsure and you feel like you constantly need reassurance. And so, or you're trying to convince a man to spend time with you, or constantly checking, spying, or being on his social media, or needing him to make you feel happy or validated. So if you feel like you need a man in order to feel happy about yourself or your life, then you're coming from a space of neediness. And it's okay for this to happen sometimes, right? Most people experience this. Most people feel this from time to time. The problem is that is if you're doing it all the time, because it'll start to feel emotionally draining to the man. At first, a lot of guys are actually attracted to this because they feel needed, right? They come up and they puff their chest up and they're like, oh, she needs me in her life, right? And so he comes up and he's like, let me help you, damsel in distress. I will, pull you from this ivory tower, right? And he like pulls you down, climbs down your hair, and then, fall into his arms, and he throws you on the white horse, and you gallop off into the sunset, right? So all right. So anyway, the point is that initially sometimes this is really attractive to men, but over time it becomes really, really draining. And the reason it's attractive is because a man actually feels like he's needed. He feels like he can be the masculine force there. He feels like he can be a man. And then what ends up happening over time is it just gets draining and draining and draining, because it's never, ever enough. And if you're ever with a guy who's like this, because a lot of times women in our community are with guys that are like this, you know that they don't fix themselves because you're there. You're there. And so they don't feel any need to fix themselves. And so you need to heal yourself. You need to start getting your needs met through yourself. That way, when you come to a relationship, you're coming to a relationship through abundance. You're coming from a place where you're already happy. You're already strong. You already feel, an abundance of connection and love in your life. So when a man comes to you, he's coming to enhance your life instead of coming in order to fill this gap, this hole that's there in your heart, right? And if he's trying to fill that gap and hole, he can never do it. And so if you're coming from a needy place and he isn't acting the right way that you want him to, it'll end up destroying you as well, not only making it less attractive for him. If you're coming from a place of value and abundance, his actions don't worry you because you're strong and confident within yourself. All right, so let's go over the 7 things again. The first one is you're chasing him. The second one is you're making him the goal instead of making the relationship the goal. Number 3 is you're proving you're the right woman for him. Number 4 is you're making him your life or the center of your life. Number 5 is hidden expectations that you expect him to just know about, right? Number 6 is sabotaging things because of past wounds. And then number 7 is neediness.